So, Bob Rapp here. It is Wednesday, and I've had some questions about kind of the process. So, um, really good meeting with some AI at an AI meetup yesterday. And I'm doing just this is going through the process piece of how I'm using different tools. Um, as you know, I work at GM. My wife and I are looking to lease or buy a large SUV. This is the scenario. By the way, this is all with just public information, and it's just taking you through the process. That is one of many ways that you can build apps. If we think about agent to agent, if we think about how users are working, I said create an app that lets me compare any model of Chevy, GMC, Cadillac, or Buick across all items. As I said in Perplexity Pro, go ahead and create the app. So it did. It said, what do you want to compare? And I said, start comparing all brands. And then we could add this to the comparison. We could take a look at this. Again, pretty standard application. As I got into it, I said, now let me actually just compare um, an agent that runs across all ICE vehicles, sends that to my personal email address, rewrite the app, send that every 20 minutes to me. So that's the new app that I was interested in. Um, and then I gave it some other parameters. And I usually start with Perplexity Pro, sometimes Claude Code, sometimes OpenAI. But Perplexity Pro generally is the most grounded in what I need. Then as I made more and more changes, you can kind of see those changes. Um, and then I said, actually, just give me a Google Sheet or a PDF, and then go ahead and write the app. Here's the code. Um, and as I went through this process, what I realized is, this has changed quite a bit from what I was originally thinking. So um, I want to actually build a full-size SUV lease deal tracker that can get me to an automated proposal from whatever dealer I want to work with. And then I said, go ahead and write the app. Right, we went through this process. Um, and Perplexity Pro for me is good for research, but it's not necessarily going to give me everything that I want here. I'll just say, I mean, this is working. It gave me the best deal right now. For me, that's a Chevy Suburban. It's the LT trim. I tend to like mid trim, all wheel drive, $53,000. And because uh, there are certain deals that I qualify for, I could enable the SMS alert. I could log it to Google Sheets. But what I did is I went back to the lab and I said, actually, take everything in the labs that I have uh, done before and put this in something called Chat PRD, another one of the Lenny's newsletter items. So I created an entire product requirements document. I didn't do an MRD, a market requirements document. And then I said, open that in Lovable, Bolt, Magic Patterns. And I'm going to start with Magic Patterns. And this is the app that was created. I'm just going to show you what the app looks like. This, by the way, was the first version of the app. I liked it actually a lot, and I want to sort by. Actually, I want to sort by. Maybe I'm going to filter on mileage or monthly payment. Um, and that said, actually, the Chevy Tahoe probably is the best deal for me. Here's the MSRP. Here's the deal. It compared. It's cheaper than the Ford, cheaper than the Yukon, and I wanted a low mileage lease, so that's pretty good. Um, I went over into Bolt. Bolt, by the way, is going really slow because I'm actually in it to go ahead and do web scraping and do a bunch of other things. So not a terribly good demo. In Lovable, I said, give me actual realistic data, give me pictures of the vehicles, give me the right, give me the, I'm going to do it by 36 months. Go ahead and search those deals. And it looks like the Nissan Armada um, is the best deal in Chicago. Probably wouldn't buy a Nissan Armada since I work for General Motors, but good to know. Um, Magic Patterns, right? Um, that's the preview of Magic Patterns. Uh, that's my Lovable Here's my bolt. My bolt is still going. And I said, could you please speed this up? It's thinking a little bit too deeply. I also went over to ChatGPT into the Codex, and I started doing some other things. And this is sometimes some of us have talked about, and we talked about the AI meetup yesterday. Do something which I call Cloud Mary. And I just want to give an example of this kind of prompt. So, and install Playwright so my app can see itself and kind of see what it looks like. Create unit, function, end-to-end Chaos Monkey, call this the Cloud Mary test suite, and run it after any major change. And so I'm going to call this Cloud Mary. I've got an architecture routine that I call. Now I also in Replit, which is my favorite no-code tool for people that really do not write code. This is a pretty great tool if you don't write code. But remember, if you don't know how to do something and you have a code development tool do it, you haven't written code. You've just let a code development tool write code. So just remember that your mileage may vary. This is probably not going to be ready for prime time. But if we look at the SCV lease finder, we do have many of the same elements. This, by the way, didn't come out terribly well, but with a little more work, each of these would be fine. Wasn't great. I then used Claude Code to do a similar kinds of thing. I wanted to point out here that there were some errors that it fixed. I haven't, by the way, done any coding. I haven't logged in and looked at code, done anything with it, although that I'm going to show that in a minute. The Armada looks like a pretty good deal these days. I, of course, prefer the Tahoe. It says, here's what I would get. I get a loyalty bonus and lease cash. So that's the deal. And then, so I also then said I could say in a bunch of these different products, I could say, publish this to GitHub. And so my BobWrap GitHub, which is something I have here called the full-size Lease Finder UI, is private, and my code is here, and says it was generated by Magic Patterns, by Source Design, and so forth. And just to be clear, if you're not a developer, you don't need to pay attention to this part of the video, but it is good to know. And then I wanted to show the presentation that I created. This came, by the way, from the file that we use for my PRD, my product requirements document. This is something called Gamma. So it says, here's what the product is, here's what it does, here's the ways that we can deliver information. And this, by the way, was written for just my wife and I looking for lease deals. So I'd like to point out that when people say, how are people interacting with your company website or with your data or with your dealers or your buyers, remember that we're choosing our own adventures these days. This is a full running set of code on a bunch of different applications, not written, by the way code is supposed to be written, right? So all the best practices we know. This is just written for my wife and I to do some shopping. And we were able to do it. This has actually taken probably about an hour of time in between breakfast and coffee and other things. Pretty amazing when you consider that all of these things are at some level of stability and they work. And they've actually given me information that is true because we've grounded it on, go find me a deal. Now, I'm not sure that it'll work in each of the zip codes, but 98104, so Seattle, this will work. I can go ahead and click on the GMC Yukon. I can view the deal. Good news is it is a picture. The bad news is I'm pretty sure that's not a GMC Yukon. That's the other point is, by the way, generative AI generates things. But if you don't know things, you still don't know things, right? So you probably want to trust but verify. But it does show you what the breakdown is for this particular GMC vehicle. I'm pretty sure, though, that's not the picture of the vehicle. So that's a process you can go through. There's certainly lots of other ways to do it. Again, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of the Lenny's newsletter bundle. And I hope that's helpful just as we kind of talk about how we get to rapid prototypes, getting from 0 to 1.